So I've been doing a series for a while now on my channel covering the top 10 best competitive budget / free to play decks, and for some reason the idea never really occurred to me of just making a separate series, but just taking out the budget part, as let's be honest here, there are a lot of whales in this ocean. By the way, just to clear the confusion, this is just a separate series, it won't be replacing the budget free to play videos. So for those of you that are new to this video format, let me give you a brief rundown on what you're going to be watching. So first of all, the video will be 10 deck lists shown in no particular order. This is because the majority of the decks on this list are pretty similar in strength, especially in this meta where there only really feels like there's a couple of decks that stand out above the rest. I'll probably still tell you which decks I think are the best as I'm going through them. Secondly, unlike my standard deck list video, there will be no gameplay shown. This is simply because I don't want this video to be 40 minutes long, and these videos are already about 10 to 15 minutes just showing the deck lists. Thirdly, unlike the free-to-play series, these deck lists will not be created by me in-game. This is because I may be a bit of a whale, but I'm more like a narwhal compared to all the blue whales swimming around, so I don't actually own all the cards required for all these decks. And although I don't consider myself an awful player, I'm obviously not the greatest, so I think it will make more sense when making a top 10 competitive video for me to grab deck lists that have proven to be performing well in a competitive setting, such as from tournament players by players who are a lot better than me. Last but not least, these videos take quite a while to make as obviously I've got to do a bit of research and write a pretty lengthy script, so I would appreciate if you would show a little bit of support on this video with likes or comments, and if you're new to the channel or just haven't done so yet, subscribing is obviously the biggest way to support the channel. And without further ado, let's get into it. So let's just get this deck out of the way first, as it's pretty obvious to everyone watching that this deck would feature in the video. Blue Eyes. This deck is a plague on Duel Links at the moment, as in terms of popularity, this deck has literally no competition. I would say on average, if you played about 10 games, at least 4 or 5 of them would be against Blue Eyes, which is actually a bit of a downside for the deck. In terms of strength, this deck would probably be competing for the best deck in the game, and in a vacuum, it probably is the best. But because of sheer popularity and how easy it is to obtain via the two structure decks, a lot of people do tend to run tech cards for this specific matchup on ladder. DD Crow, Light Imprisoning Mirror, obviously FA Hang On Mac, and a few others are quite popular ways to deal with this deck, which in my opinion keep it from being the obvious choice for the best deck in this video. As for the deck's playstyle, it's very straightforward and quite easy. You spend most of the game discarding stones with cards like Karma Cart or Consonance to special summon multiple copies of Blue Eyes, to either beat over your opponents as they are, or use as fodder for powerful synchro monsters like Spirit, or thanks to your skill, powerful fusion monsters like Twin Burst. Overall, the deck is just really strong, really easy to obtain, and very unlikely to go anywhere anytime soon. Next up we have Fire King. This deck has popped up quite recently, even though it's been out for quite a while now, due to it having a ton of decent matchups. There are not a lot of ways for most decks in the meta to avoid being completely board wiped by Garunix, outside of maybe Dark Lords. And due to the sheer amount of Kiteroids and Veils each of these decks run, it becomes an extremely good counter to any OTK matchups trying to cheese wins with Hatronade. Probably the deck's biggest downside is that a lot of the counters people are running for Blue Eyes do tend to work quite well against this deck, as it's also a very heavy graveyard deck, FA Hang On Mac, DD Crow, etc. And although a lot of these decks don't have an out, some of the more popular decks like Dark Lords with Tez and their Negates, or Spirit Dragon and their Azures, have outs to Garunix, which are also really accessible, and they really do decimate this deck's playstyle. If you're playing against a deck that doesn't have these outs, which to be fair on ladder is quite likely, this deck will just win on the spot, and it does so with continuous board wiping nukes. Next up we have the KC Cup Pub Stomper, Onomatopoeia. This deck is just the fastest, most consistent OTK in the game. Its skill alone will basically guarantee you any starting hand to be near perfect, which when playing a deck that primarily consists of dicking your opponent in one turn, is a pretty dangerous thing, especially when compared to the fact this deck can run do draw to give you a 60% chance of opening Hatronade to remove any protection your opponent might have in the form of back row. The deck is basically just one big Xyz toolbox. Need removal? M7 or number 70. Need negate? We have Bouncer. Graveyard giving you trouble? Here's a Dweller. Want to dick your opponent in one turn? Here's a Samurai. Obviously though, this deck does have a massive downside as it's primarily an OTK offensive style, so if you don't win the coin toss and go second, your chances of winning drop drastically, as sitting on a Bouncer as your only form of protection going first isn't a whole lot in today's meta, and you're probably going to end up getting OTK'd yourself, or just let your opponent set up an unbeatable board state. In saying this though, if you're looking for a deck to rack up points in a KC Cup, this is probably your best bet, as quick games and quick wins will stomp that format, which is what this deck is designed to do. So expect to see quite a few Onomats in the top 100. Next up, we have a very thematic deck for a whale video. Water Xyz. This deck is all about Shark Skill Territory of the Sharks, which allows you to make all water monsters you control level 4, which is an insane skill when combined with cards like Deep Sea Diva, which turns this into a 1 card rank 4 summon. Which is even more insane when you remember Diva can special summon Atlanteans, which have removal effects that activate when they are sent to the grave to activate a water monster effect. So you can summon Diva, special summon out an Atlantean, create an Abyss Dweller, and now you have complete control of your opponent's graveyard and a quick effect to removal for anything your opponent plays, all from just one single normal summon. Unfortunately for this deck, as the skill is a pretty powerful one, it comes with a pretty hefty cost, and that is you are locked into only water monsters, meaning this deck is extremely straightforward and you don't have a whole lot of options to choose from when it comes to Xyz summoning. You have Dweller, and you have Shark. That's basically it. But if you don't mind the lack of versatility in this deck, it's still quite a powerful option. Up next, we have the latest addition to the top tiers of the game, but also one of the original top tier decks, Harpy. Harpies are known for their consistency, as they have two really powerful opening monsters in Channeler and Perfumer, both of which will result in a bare minimum of Cyber/Harpy. Due to the consistency of this deck with very little resources required, the deck has a ton of room for back row and tech options, such as Swallow's Nest, Book of Moon, Cosmic Cyclone, Offering to the Doomed, Karma Cut, Treacherous, whatever you like, all of which are consistently drawn as well thanks to the deck's free Pot of Greed with Feather's Rest, which a lot of your Harpy combos will just finish on. I think the general consensus for this deck is that it's extremely consistent, which makes it a top tier contender, but compared to some of the other higher tier decks, it lacks a lot of strength. This deck is basically a one-trick Cyber/Harpy, and if it gets removed, then you're probably not going to have a good time. It does have access to a pretty decent Xyz toolbox though, which can make up for a bit of this deck's lack in power. Next up, we have a bit of a crossover from the free-to-play competitive video, Ritual Beast. This deck is the ultimate deck in terms of longevity inside the higher tiers of the game. Ever since its release back in 2019, it has been in and out of the top tiers continuously, and is still topping tournaments in current year. Of all the decks on this list, in my opinion, this one would definitely be the hardest to play, and to master it would take a long ass time. The deck is essentially a combo deck that utilizes fusion monsters that don't require polymerization to summon, and are able to swap themselves in and out to avoid removal, return multiple cards to hand, as well as generate a ton of value for themselves. Honestly, unlike the other decks in this video, I can't really give you guys my thoughts on what the downsides are to this deck, other than its difficulty, as I personally don't have a whole lot of experience with it, but I know Duel Links Meta recently uploaded a full hour-long guide on this deck, so feel free to check that out if you want to get some more info. Next up, we have the latest deck to be abusing Titan Showdown, Evil Eye. Now this deck's strength is 100% based on what is currently meta at the time, as its entire gimmick is based around the equip spell Evil Eye of Selene, making one of your monsters completely immune to destruction and target effects. If the current meta doesn't offer a whole lot of outs to an untargetable, indestructible monster, the deck will excel greatly. On top of that, thanks to Medusa, in a very graveyard heavy meta, this deck can also pop off by simply using Medusa's effect to banish your opponent's problematic cards in grave. So against a deck like Fire King, which is completely reliant on graveyard and destruction removal, you'll instantly win. Against Onomat that relies 100% on target removal, you instantly win. Against Blue Eyes or Dark Lord, you can just banish a good majority of their graveyard before they can properly set up. And thanks to this deck's latest edition of Titan Showdown and Nightmare Shark combo, the deck now has access to a reliable OTK finisher that can ignore your opponent's current board state. Now the downsides of this deck are pretty obvious. First of all, it relies on you trying to normal summon a monster. So if you don't open back row removal, and you happen to go second, you'll lose instantly to any trap card or quick play spell in existence. Secondly, it relies on a continuous spell, so if your opponent plays any kind of back row removal, specifically banish back row removal, you'll have a very bad time. Thankfully though, a lot of the current top tier decks have been favouring away from running Cosmic Cyclone recently, so it's a pretty decent meta for this deck. Next up, we have another contender for the best KC Cup farmer, Cyber Dragon. This deck is basically split into two strategies. You go second, you summon 32 different fusion monsters like Rampage, Twin, and End, thanks to the combination of Fusion Gate, Fusion Support, and your skill, all of which can attack multiple times a turn. And if you go first, you just set a non-target board nuking trap card in Overflow and pass the turn. The deck is extremely straightforward, and there isn't really a board state this deck cannot break. Just like Onomats, it's extremely quick. But again, just like Onomats, it shares the same problem of the coin toss. Sure, Overflow is an extremely powerful trap card going first, but if your opponent runs any kind of back row removal and hits it, that's all the disruption you have. The deck doesn't have a negates fallback on. Because of the speed of this deck, if you're looking for a deck to play in the KC Cup, I would highly recommend this as an option, as you'll win a lot of games, and you'll also know pretty quickly if you're about to lose a game, so you can just surrender and go on to the next one. Next up, we have a deck that did receive a massive kick in the gonads recently. Thunder Dragon. Now this deck did receive a pretty harsh counter card in the meta recently, which basically removes it from its pedestal of probably the third best deck in the game, with the release of FA Hang On Mag, which Thunder Dragon quite literally cannot remove at all. And unlike other decks which can just tech in a spell and trap card to deal with it, Thunders don't really have that option due to how limited the space in their deck already is, and how much it relies on getting monsters in the grave. In saying that though, Mac has been losing a lot of popularity recently as more people have teched against it, meaning Thunder Dragon, especially on ladder, can easily make a comeback, and the deck is exceptionally strong still, with one of the highest board funding potentials in the game, and has access to not only the Vioneer for removal, but also the strongest Xyz toolbox possible, of any generic 4, 5, 6, or 8. The deck has access to M7, Armageddon, and Sun Dragon. Keep in mind too, this deck is reasonably quick, so it's probably also a pretty good deck for a KC Cup format. And last but not least, what I personally think is the strongest deck in the game at the moment, especially for ladder play, Star Seraph Dark Lords. This deck is completely nuts, with its only real weakness being itself. The deck can sometimes feel like it has enough bricks to build an entire castle, with it running not only a whole bunch of high level monsters, but also a Star Seraph combo that really only works if you have 2 Star Seraphs in hand already. But the trade-off for this occasional bricking is unreal. In one turn, if you draw absolutely perfect, you can summon a rank 4 made of 3 materials, draw 5 cards, remove 2 cards, force your opponent to discard a card at random, summon 2 Dark Lord monsters, set up 2 monster negates, and add a Dark Lord to hand that prevents your Dark Lords from destruction. Just try to name a better opener than that. It's great going first, and it's great going second. And to top it all off, the deck now has access to the ultimate anti-Blue Eyes combo of FA Hang On Mac plus level augmentation, to create a monster with 4k attack that is immune to all activated monster effects, and make every card sent to your opponent's grave be banished instead. Now in tourney play, this combo has been phased out a little bit now, as more decks just ran Book of Moon to counter it, and it's more of a side deck card. But on ladder, I 100% recommend playing this combo, especially with Forbidden Lance, to provide a bit of protection from pesky back row, as it's just the best counter to Blue Eyes, which is by far the most popular deck you will see on the ladder. Alright guys, that's it for my list. Let me know your thoughts down below, and also let me know if you want to continue this series every couple of weeks or months as the meta changes. Make sure if you did enjoy the video to leave a like, and consider subscribing to the channel if you're not subbed already. Thanks for watching, laters.
Hey, big brother, can I watch SpongeBob?
Shut up, Mokuba. I'm busy flagging YouTube videos to compensate for the fact that I have an extremely small penis.
Oh.